And I was there with my 5-year-old, my 3-year-old crying, one on each leg, and my bags full of groceries, and I just started crying. At some point I just couldn't hold it anymore. And then there's this really fancy, sophisticated lady on her high heels. She looks at me and she said, "Are you okay?" And she genuinely meant it. There's that natural kindness that comes out of Singaporeans that then disappears in some spheres.
This is Anna. She's from Spain and has been living in Singapore for 6 years. She works as an interpreter for the United Nations. And what if I tell you that Anna translated for Elon Musk? During our incredible conversation, she shared what she likes and dislikes about Singaporeans and the secret to obtaining permanent residency after only 1 year of living in Singapore. I'm Max, entrepreneur and a YouTuber from Singapore. Let's go!
Do you miss anything, especially from your life in Europe, in Geneva or in Spain?
When you say the verb miss, I miss my friends and my family and all that, but what I miss every day is bread. Singapore for that is amazing. You can find anything from anywhere in the world. Food, cosmetics, clothes, anything you can dream of, you can find it in Singapore. But bread. I mean, bread, because of the weather and the humidity, you either eat it like out of the oven right there, or it just becomes chewing gum. And it's so disappointing. I miss my bread. I miss my bread.
Did you have any challenges to socialize, or it was like smooth and easy for you?
Socializing, that's a difficult one in Singapore, right?
Oh, tell me.
I find it's very difficult. I guess in Geneva was the same. It's very difficult to break into circles that have been established for years. Like if you went to school with your friends and you've been friends forever and your friendship needs are covered, why would you open the door to a foreigner, the door of your heart, since we're talking about love? Why would you open that door to a foreigner, right? And then with the expat or immigrant community, we're never here to stay. So once you make friends, they leave. I mean, if you've been around for more than 2-3 years, you've probably seen waves of people coming and going. So I think it's difficult to make lasting friendships. It's funny because you would trust your life. You put your kids, which is probably your most precious asset, in the hands of someone you barely met, like a neighbor, because you trust them with your life, because you know they understand what you're going through. But at the same time, 2 years later, you won't even make a phone call. It's a weird kind of friendship. It's like very deep and very shallow at the same time.
You got PR after 2 years in Singapore. Like, what's the secret?
1 year. 1 year.
1 year.
I
Wow.
have no idea. I actually have no idea because we have 2 girls and we thought, you know, there's all these rumors about what you think or what, you know, what you require. So what we did a scouting. We visited different agencies and they all said, "I'll file your profile," which meant that we had high chances of being accepted. And then we just did it online by ourselves. When an agency says we have an 80% or a 90% rate approval, it means that they vet your profile before they send it. And they would only send it if they know for a fact that you're going to be approved. So if 2 or 3 tell you that you're okay to go, then probably have chances of it working. I think there were several things. There was the fact that both my husband and I went to really good schools. The fact that we brought all our savings here. We showed that we were serious and committed to be in Singapore. And then we also had an inquiry about my former employers. And I think when I showed the UN card, kind of made them like me more. It was approved, but you never know. I mean, the criteria are public. Singapore is one thing, and that's very transparent. If you fulfill the criteria, I would just say, try your chances. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know.
If you love Singapore as much as I do, you will want to stay here longer or even forever. All you need is PR, a status of permanent resident. But more than 100,000 applications are submitted each year, including mine. And only 30k of them are approved. So to be lucky, you have to be the best. But don't worry, you can increase your chances of success with the help of Immigration at SG. The service will assess the strength of your profile, offer strategic insights, handhold you through the process and manage the entire work for your Singapore PR application. Immigration at SG is the leading one-stop immigration consultancy providing full immigration services for individuals and businesses. These guys have been in the game since 2014, so you can trust that they know what they're doing. They also provide other immigration services from work pass to citizenship applications. Due to the experience and expertise in Immigration at SG team and the strategic and tailored approach to your immigration issues, you'll find your path to your long life in Singapore made as easy as possible. So follow the link below and book a free comprehensive 1-hour consultation with immigration experts from Immigration at SG. Plus, use my promo code for 10% discount on other services.
Tell me about your social circle here in Singapore. Do you have local friends, or like you mainly have Spanish friends, or like the whole bunch of international people?
It's funny because I was thinking about that the other day. Most of my friends are mixed couples or people who've been abroad for a long time. I don't even have pure breed Spanish friends who just moved from Spain and this is the first country where they go to. I also think, because of immigration laws, all of us who are foreigners went to the same schools. We all have a similar international experience. We all have similar jobs. We all speak several languages. That kind of makes it easier to make friends because you share so many things, so many life experiences. I have a few local friends, mostly through school, through the children. All my local friends, all my Singaporean friends, they've all traveled the world, studied abroad. So I don't think it's a matter of being Singaporean or being Spanish or being Russian. I think it's more a matter of how exposed you've been to other things, which kind of is like what drives people together, right? When you share experiences. So I think it would be difficult for a multilingual, multicultural person to make friends with someone who's never left their country in Singapore or anywhere in the world. It's just a different mindset. It's a different view of the world. What's funny in Singapore is that I have friends that I met 20 years ago in different cities. And we all ended up, for one reason or another, because life has funny ways sometimes, in Singapore. I want to say those are my best friends here, people that I met a long time ago. We've done different things and then we've ended up here.
My wife's friend from the uni, she ended up in Singapore at the similar time with us, but she was abroad. She was traveling and living in different countries for like a good 10 years, as us as well, as my wife. And then she just came here and we become friends like again.
My husband actually plays the bass in a band with his best friend from college, who just moved here a couple of years ago. That's also the beauty of Singapore. It's such an international city. You never know who you're going to find here.
You have PR, and then you probably have plans to live some more time in Singapore.
We're happy here. My kids are thriving. They're fluent in Chinese, which to me it's amazing. It's just very difficult because we are a third culture family. We're neither from here nor from there. I would say that it's easier maybe in Singapore because there's so many families like ours. But I have the feeling nothing is here to stay. I felt like that already in Geneva, but I think in Singapore, maybe because there is such a quick turnover of people, it feels even stronger. And then also there's some precariousness. I mean, I'm a PR and I think I'm privileged to be so, and I'm very honored that Singapore granted my family a PR. But at the same time, every 5 years you have to renew it. So every 5 years they're again asking, are you really here for the long term? And then who knows, parents grow older. You might want to go back for a couple of years and then telework for a while and then come back. What if that's the year when you need to renew your PR? Then it'd be over for good. That precariousness. Also, I understand it comes from a point of privilege because in the European Union, we forgot about all that. You travel, there's 27 countries, you can move freely and establish yourself freely in 27 countries. But there is that sense of futility and precariousness in the situation in Singapore as a foreigner.
Do you think Singapore could do something like more for foreigners to feel more comfortable and more stable, or it's like that?
Listen, I would not be the one to give lessons to anyone. I understand that Singapore has a very specific set of characteristics and a very specific set of needs. I understand they play their cards in the way they think is best. I don't necessarily agree with all the policies, but it's not my place either. As a foreigner who's bringing talent and capital to this country, I find sometimes we're treated as an asset and not so much as people. And it's a contrast because Singapore is such a kind country. Like I honestly, that was one of the first things that I noticed when I moved here, and that really shocked me in a positive way, was how kind people are, like generally speaking on their everyday lives. Like I remember when we first arrived here, we're staying at a service apartment. All I knew was a hallway that took me to Paragon, which is to me now one of the most hideous places in the world, just because it could be anywhere in the world, right? So I was grocery shopping there because that's the only place I knew. Freezing, because in Singapore there's 2 seasons, indoors and outdoors. I was freezing to death, not understanding a thing because I thought this was a tropical country. And I was there with my 5-year-old, my 3-year-old crying, one on each leg, and my bags full of groceries, and I just started crying. At some point I just couldn't hold it anymore. And then there's this really fancy, sophisticated lady on her high heels, passes by me, and then she looks at me and she comes back and she said, "Are you okay?" And she genuinely meant it. I was so impressed. That had never happened to me. And then I figured, I'm gonna be okay. It's gonna be fine. There's that natural kindness that comes out of Singaporeans that then disappears in some spheres when dealing with immigration. But I see that too, this is maybe anecdotal, but I see that too when they drive. The minute a Singaporean, the kindest Singaporean, the kindest soul on earth, the minute he or she jumps on a car, they turn into monsters. What is wrong with cars in Singapore? They will scream at you, they will yell, they would never let you cross. We used to joke, and I'm just going on and on, but we used to joke when I lived in Geneva, when my friends from Spain would come visit, we would play a game. I don't recommend, don't do this at home. We'll go to a pedestrian crossing and I'll say, just close your eyes and cross the street.
What?
And cars stop. They really stop. They respect pedestrians so much. Again, don't do this at home. But it worked. I mean, that's how Swiss drive. Whereas here is the extreme opposite. It's like you have to fear for your life. Even if you have priority, even a pedestrian's crossing, even if the car is turning, just get out of the way because they'll run you over. The kindest person would just run you over. Sorry, I had to say that.
Why do you think is that?
I don't know. I see that attitude in many countries in the region, though. I mean, it's not just here. But here is just the contrast. Like, they won't let... The traffic rules are just like a suggestion, like in Italy. It's an indication, it's a suggestion.
For me, it was the funny experience. Like, I lived in the UK for a year. And the UK drivers, they're super polite. And they let you in if you are, like, turning from the smaller road to a highway. They actually changed the lane to the second lane to let you in. And then I was used to drive there, and then I went to the wells. And I tried the same thing, and people just never let me go. I was like, uh-oh. So it's better to check how people used to drive. Yeah. And it's like wells, it's the same island. What else Westerner should know before moving to this country?
Be prepared for peace of mind. I didn't know that I had so much noise in my brain until I moved to Singapore. I mean, for me, this is a new level of quality of life. It's not so much, I mean, of course, there's always things that you miss, that could be better. Every time you move, there are things that are better and things that are worse. But the one thing that I would definitely miss if one day I move out of Singapore is the peace of mind. There are all these things that are just super efficient in Singapore. Something breaks, you can have someone in your house within the hour. They say they'll come. I just had a parcel delivered. They say we'll come between 10 and 11, and at 10:15 they were here. I mean, in what world does that happen? Buses run, the taxis are super efficient, super cheap, like everything. You have a question, like you make your tax return in less than 10 minutes. Where does that happen? I remember for months, when the time of the tax return came, you'd be thinking, I need to do my tax returns, and you prepare mentally for that moment where you would spend 3 days just cranky, trying to fight with a different... No, everything is just so efficient. And it's just like it empties your brain. Like all of a sudden you have all that extra space to complain about all the things you don't like. Also, one thing you need to be prepared of, need to be prepared for repeating things a gazillion times.
Like, can you give me an example?
Like you order at a restaurant and then you make your order and then they'll repeat it to confirm. And they might repeat it again, like at least 2 times. But if you go to the doctors, that's even worse. Like before they give you an aspirin, paracetamol or Panadol, they'll be asking you your FIN number. Remember your FIN number. That's a very important one. They'll ask you a gazillion times, and it's like, yes, it's me. It was me 2 minutes ago when you ask. It's still me. It hasn't changed. I still have a fever. Just give me my Panadol, please. So be prepared to repeat things.
Maybe that's why it's working here. Otherwise, it's like, okay, small mistake in one letter, one number, and something goes wrong.
So another thing, maybe as a Spaniard, and I think Russians and Spaniards share that, and Italians and Latin, like more Mediterranean cultures share all that. Our brains are wired in such a way that we are always looking for the most efficient way of doing things, even if that means cutting corners sometimes. Because you just, there's all this red tape and you want to do that the most efficient way. So that sometimes pushes us to bend the rules slightly, right? Well, in Singapore, you don't have to do that because it's not necessary. And it's so weird because you've been doing that your entire life. That's how you work. And then all of a sudden, you realize, like quickly within 2-3 months, you realize you're just following the rules. And it's so smooth and everything just works. You don't need to bend the rules because rules are there for you. Rules are your friends. Embrace the rules. And I don't know. I mean, when I talk about this with my European friends, they don't really believe me. They think I'm crazy. I mean, they're like, oh, you know, you've been brainwashed. But no, it really works. When everybody follows the rules work. So that was mind-blowing for me. Maybe be prepared for that too. Although it happens naturally, organically, you don't realize you become a Singaporean. Like Singapore grows in you. I don't know. And then it kind of makes you totally unadapted to live anywhere else in the world.
I think it's also like a misunderstanding of Singapore in other countries. People say like, oh, Singapore is like also strict, everything is prohibited. But no, I mean, it's strict in a good way. It's just to make it a nice place to live and like easy place to live.
And it's funny how rules make you free. I mean, it sounds like Big Brother, but I can't explain it better. I have some friends who are very radical about this in Europe, and I always tell them you need to come here and see it with your own eyes and feel it in your own body. Also, I have to say that I'm a bit of a rule freak. I mean, I really like rules, and I think it's, you know, basis for fairness, so it suits me. I was very happy in Switzerland. I'm even happier in Singapore, but it really works. Like, you don't feel oppressed by the rules at all. On the contrary, it's like it's predictable, so you know what's expected from you, and it's actually common sense. It's not like there's anything, you know, they always come back with the chewing gum anecdote. And I mean, sure, if you can't trust people not to throw the chewing gum on the floor, then, you know, that's what I tell my kids. If I can't trust you to do this, then you're not doing it at all. I think maybe Singapore will be ready to have chewing gums back. I think that now people wouldn't throw them on the floor anymore. But I don't know if we're ready for that radical change.
So radical.
No, that's playing with fire. But I mean, you know, when you go to European cities and the floor is disgusting, then you sometimes wonder if they're to be trusted with chewing gums in the first place.
You mentioned Switzerland. Like, we went traveling Switzerland, in France and Italy last winter, and we met some friends in Geneva and Zurich. And because like there are a lot of friends actually in Geneva, because I used to work for Procter & Gamble and they have headquarters there. And so we our plan was to meet people and like compare life in Switzerland and Singapore. No place can beat Singapore.
Having lived in Switzerland, I think Singapore is an improved version of that, but it also comes at a price. I mean, one thing that I couldn't stand in Switzerland is the fact that on Saturday, 5 p.m., everything closes and doesn't open until Monday. So, you know, if you haven't planned, and I'm a plan freak and I love plans, but that's too much even for me. And it makes your life very, very difficult as a working, in my case, mother of two, who also enjoys free time and exercising. I mean, how do you fit all that into that very tight schedule? At the same time, I understand that the price you pay for that, for, you know, having an NTUC 24/7, like NTUC is the supermarket, open 24/7, is that some people have very low wages and very difficult working conditions. So I understand there's a price to pay for that comfort that some of us enjoy, or like having help at home, which was something unthinkable in Switzerland because you can't afford it. I mean, when my kids were younger, many months, I'm a freelancer, so many months, my whole salary would go just on babysitting. So, I mean, of course here babysitting is cheap, but you don't see your children because you're working all the time. So, you know, it's a difficult balance. And I think both Singapore and Switzerland have some work to do on that life-work balance, especially for women. But yeah, Singapore gets closer.
If you rate Singapore and like gender inequality, in general, like inequality between different layers of people, would you rate Singapore high? Because let's say domestic helpers. Some people say it's a modern day slavery. It's super useful, super helpful for people who can afford them. But do you think it's right?
The options that these women have are very, very limited. And for them, I mean, I would freak out thinking that I have to go live with a family that I don't know. If you take 5 minutes to speak with them, any of them, they all have horror stories to share. Their lives are so difficult. And then they still find that's the best solution. I mean, they'd rather do that than staying home, because staying home is even worse. These women, they're stuck at somebody else's house in intimacy of a family. The principle that work gives you dignity, which is a universal principle, depends in this case in particular a lot on who employs you. And especially if you have someone at home, it's your responsibility to give them decent work in decent conditions and with dignity. I find some of the stories of these women, I'm getting goosebumps just to think about it. I mean, these women are single-handedly taking families out of poverty in other countries. I mean, what they're doing is very brave, and they're doing it because they have decent jobs in a developed country such as Singapore. Now, if you take the responsibility of having someone living at your place working for you, it is your responsibility to make her working conditions not only decent but dignified. So at the end of the day, it's not that Singapore does this or that, it's the employer as a human being. I mean, how decent are you as a human being? Sometimes just words like thank you or please go a really, really long way, and they'll be happy to be paid less or live in a smaller room to be dignified as human beings.
If you like this video, check out the next one. But you have only 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.